Hey friends, welcome back to Language Arts 1. Today we're going to be doing a close read of pages 171 to 179 in The Glass Castle. So go ahead and get your books, get your sticky notes out, and get ready to work. So today in the pages that we focus on, you're really going to just see the fallout from what occurred with Irma and how the family responded. So as we know, Irma was taking care of the kids when Rex and Rosemary went to Phoenix to fetch some items. Things got out of hand back in Welch, and when Rex and Rosemary returned, they found out that they had been kicked out of Irma's house. So as a result, they're forced to go and find their own home, and we know that the family has no money, they're dirt poor, so they really can't afford to buy a new house. As a result, Rex works hard, saves up $1,000, and he finds this house that is pretty much a shell of a house. They move into 93 Little Hobart Street. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is an address that you are going to want to memorize because, again, this is going to be the source of a lot of the trauma that we'll see later on in the text. So 93 Little Hobart Street, again, it was only a $1,000 house. And when the family moves into the house, they discover that it has no indoor plumbing, there's no electricity, there's no gas, the house doesn't have any insulation, so it's super cold when it's cold outside, inside of the house. It's infested with bugs and rodents. And while we understand the Walls family has been kind of a eclectic family or a very unique family up until this point, they do things the way that they want. Yeah, they might have been poor, but they were happy. What we're going to discover in the pages that we read today is that their experiences that they are going to be dealing with in this new home are ultimately going to really change and shift the way the family interacts with one another. So now that you are caught up on the pages that we skipped, go ahead and open up your books to page 171 and I'll get it started reading. So again, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the top of page 171. We're going to focus on a couple of things while we're reading today, so make sure that you are paying close attention. Let's get ready to read. Dad had taken to disappearing for days at a time. When I asked him where he'd been, his explanations were either so vague or so improbable that I stopped asking. Whenever he did come home, he usually brought a bag of groceries in each arm. We'd gobble deviled ham sandwiches with thick slices of onion while he told us about the progress of his investigation into the UMW and his latest money-making schemes. People were always offering him jobs, he'd explain, but he wasn't interested in work for hire, in saluting and sucking up and brown-nosing and taking orders. You'll never make a fortune working for the boss man, he said. He was focused on striking it rich. There might not be gold in West Virginia, but there was plenty of other ways to make your pile. For instance, he was working on technology to burn coal more efficiently so that even the lowest grade coal would be mined and sold. There was a big market for that, he said, and it was going to make us rich beyond our dreams. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, when Rex left Phoenix, he was not really wanting to come back to Welch. He knew that this was a community where he did not do well in when he was growing up. He did not really love growing up with his parents because he was poor, just like his family is currently. So now Rex is disappearing more. He's probably stressing more because he is not happy with the circumstances. And now he's just looking for ways to help them make more money so that they can get out of the circumstance. Let's jump back in. I listened to Dad's plans and tried to encourage him, hoping that what he was saying was true, but also pretty certain it wasn't. Money would come in, and with it, food. And on the rare occasion that Dad landed an odd job or Mom received a check from the oil company leasing the drilling rights on her land in Texas, Mom was always vague about how big the land was and where exactly it was, and she refused to consider selling it. All we knew was that for every couple of months, this check would show up and we have plenty of food for days at a time, which is something that they're definitely not used to. When the electricity was on, we ate a lot of beans. A big bag of pinto beans cost under $1 and would feed us for days. They tasted especially good if you added a spoonful of mayonnaise. That's disgusting. We also ate a lot of rice mixed with jack mackerel, which Mom said was an excellent brain food. Jack mackerel was not as good as tuna, but was better than cat food, which we ate from time to time when things got really tight. Sometimes Mom popped up a big batch of popcorn for dinner. It had lots of fiber, she pointed out, and she always had it salted heavily because the iodine will keep us from getting goiters. I don't want my kids looking like pelicans, she said. Once, when an extra big royalty check came in, Mom bought us a whole canned ham. We ate off of it for days, cutting thick slices of it for sandwiches. Since we had no refrigerator, we left the ham on a kitchen shelf. After I'd been there for about a week, I went to saw myself a slab at dinner time and found it crawling with little white worms. Mom was sitting on the sofa bed eating the piece she'd cut. Mom, the ham's full of maggots, I said. Don't be so picky, she told me. Just slice off the maggoty parts and the inside's fine. Brian and I became expert foragers. We picked crab apples and wild blackberries and pawpaws during the summer and fall, and we swiped ears of corn from Old Man Wilson's farm. We're going to pause there. I want you to go ahead and read the rest of page 172, read 173, and then the little paragraph on 174. Answer the next couple of questions and meet me on the top of page 175. Alrighty, folks, let's jump back to page 175. We'll read together this page, maybe a page and a half, and then you'll be responsible for reading a few more pages and analyzing a little bit more. Winter came hard that year. Just after Thanksgiving, the first big snow started with a fat, wet flake the size of butterflies. They floated down lazily, but were followed by smaller, drier flakes that kept coming for days. At first, I loved winter in Welch. The blanket of snow hid the soot and made the entire town seem clean and cozy. Our house looked almost like all of the others on Little Hobart Street. It was so cold that the youngest, most fragile branches snapped in the frigid air, and very quickly I started feeling it. I still had only my thin wool coat with the buttons missing. I felt almost as cold in the house. Remember, they have no insulation, so they don't have any gas, so there's no heat going through the house. While we had the coal stove, we had no coal. There were 42 coal retailers listed in Welch's phone book. A ton of coal, which would last most of the winter, cost about $50, including delivery, or even as little as $30 for the lower grade stuff. Mom said she was sorry, but there was no room in our budget for coal. We'd have to devise other ways to stay warm. Imagine being in the house and your mom telling you, sorry son or daughter, I don't have the means to get you warm for this cold winter that we're about to experience. Figure it out yourselves. Because that's the predicament that the kids are being put in at this moment. Let's jump back into the text. The pieces we found were so small that after an hour, we'd fill only half of the bucket. We needed at least a bucket to keep a fire going for one evening. So while we made occasional coal collecting expeditions, we used mostly wood. We couldn't afford wood any more than we could afford coal, and Dad wasn't around to chop and split any, which meant it was up to us kids to gather dead branches and logs from the forest. Remember, Rex is already taken to disappearing for days at a time, weeks at a time, saying that he's working, okay? So he's not around while they're kind of suffering through this cold right now. Finding good wood was a challenge. We trekked along the mountainside looking for pieces that weren't waterlogged or rotten, shaking the snow off of branches. But we went through the wood awfully quickly. And while coal fire burns hot, wood fire doesn't throw off much heat. We all huddled around the pot-belly stove, wrapped in blankets, holding out our hands toward the smoking heat. Mom said we should be thankful because we had it better than pioneers who didn't have the modern conveniences like window glass and cast iron stoves. One day we got a roaring fire going, but even then we could still see our breath, and there was ice on both sides of the windows. Brian and I decided that we needed to make the fire even bigger and went out to collect more wood. On the way back, Brian stopped and looked at our house. There's no snow on our roof. He said he was right. It had completely melted. Either the house has snow on its roof. Every other house has snow on its roof, he said. He was right about that too. This house doesn't have a lick of insulation, Brian told Mom when we went back inside. All the heat's going right through the roof. We may not have insulation, Mom said, as we all gathered around her. We may not have insulation, Mom said, as we all gathered around the stove, but we have each other. I'm going to pause you there, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to go ahead and read the rest of 176, and you're going to read all the way until the bottom of 178, ladies and gentlemen. Answer the next question. In what 3 ways does life continue to deteriorate or get worse for the Walls through this winter? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, you're going to read the rest of 176. I stopped right where it says, but we have each other. Read the rest of that page. 177, 178, and meet me at the top of 179. So as you discovered, things continued to get worse for the family. They took desperate measures to try to keep warm in a series of events that shouldn't have even taken place had the parents had taken responsibility. So ladies and gentlemen, let's read a little more, and you have one more thing to do for me. She had us use kerosene to try to get the fire going better, and it had exploded, just like Dad said it would. Nothing in the house except Lori's hair had caught fire, but the explosion had blown back her coat and skirt, and the flames had scorched her thighs. Brian went out and got some snow, and we packed it on Lori's legs, which were dark pink. The next day, she had blisters the length of her thighs. Just remember, Mom said after examining the blisters, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. If that was true, I'd be Hercules by now, Lori said. Days later, when the blisters burst, the clear liquid inside ran down to her feet. For weeks, the fronts of her legs were open sores, so sensitive that she had trouble sleeping under blankets. But by then, the temperature had fallen again, and if she kicked off the blankets, she froze. JK, you have just like 2 more things to do. One day that winter, I went to a classmate's house to work on a school project. Carrie Mae Blankship's father was an administrator at the McDowell County Hospital, and her family lived on a solid brick house in McDowell Street. The living room was decorated in shades of orange and brown, and the plaid pattern of the curtains matched the couch upholstery. On the walls was a framed photo of Carrie Mae's older sister in her high school graduation gown. It was lit with its own tiny lamp, just like a museum. There was also a small plastic box on the wall near the living room. There was also a small plastic box on the wall near the living room door. A row of tiny numbers ran along the top under a lever. Carrie Mae's father saw me studying the box while she was out of the room. It's a thermostat, he told me. You move the lever to make the house warmer or cooler. I thought he was pulling my leg, like she's saying I thought he was joking with me. But he moved the lever and I heard a muffled roar kick on in the basement. That's the furnace, he said. He led me over to a vent in the floor and had me hold my hand over it and feel the warm air wafting upward. I didn't want to say anything to show how impressed I was, but for many nights afterward, I dreamed that we had a thermostat at 93 Little Holbrook Street, that all we had to do to fill our house with that warm, clean furnace heat was to move a lever. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to pause there. That is going to conclude our reading for the week. We're more than halfway through the book now, ladies and gentlemen. So what I want you to start thinking about as we head into week 6 is how can you build a theme from what you have gathered thus far in the text? All right, folks, thanks for reading. Get your last question done. See you next week.